we always talk about our teachers have this relentless commitment to improving student learning. And what do we do to support them, but also to push them? And so when we look at this, we always communicate, we're in this together, but it's not just words that we say, we actually mean it. Every year when I start off and give my speech out, I talk about many hands make light work, but we actually do that. And so some of the ways that we come about and do that is through our collaboration and our support. When a new teacher comes to us, in many school divisions, they have mentorship programs, and we do too, but the mentorship programs are either to their local school or to a connecting teacher at another school that teaches the same grades. We have instructional coaches that work in that environment too. So they work with all our teachers and administrators. But what we do when a new teacher comes to us is we align them with an instructional coach for 2 years. And so at any point in time, they could reach out not to just their mentor teacher, but they can reach out to to an instructional coach. And so that has really provided a support system for us.
Back to Alberta today. I have these sort of general themes and statements. And if you saw my previous show on the 100 episodes where I walk through every province and kind of make a broad statement of it, they're my opinions and experiences over time. And so take them for what you will. There's no scientific proof about them. However, I think from what I hear when I share those thoughts, people go, yeah, that sounds right. What I would say about Alberta specifically is that the leadership there are the most down-to-earth people that I know. And simply what I mean by that is that they are more apt to maybe take their guard down a little bit more than in other places. And I'm not even sure why that is. That is my experience with the number of leaders that I've associated with. And Jeff Grimsdale is just such a person. Jeff is extremely humble and a little bit quiet in the background, but is also just very welcoming and thoughtful in his presentation. And today you're going to hear him. He is very proud of his school division and the work that they have done as a team. And you are going to hear that very clear. Jeff talks at length about his division and what they've done to create a real welcoming, high level of well-being, I would say specifically. And I know that from the times I've been with Jeff in their school division, that's the feeling that you get, that these people are happy to be there. They're excited to be there. They like to be there with one another and all those things that I think people are striving for. So I think today you're going to glean a lot of really interesting insights from Jeff and the things that are happening at Golden Hills. And so really excited to be able to share this episode with you as actually the start of my second 100 episodes. Thanks, Jeff. And I hope you enjoy my conversation today with Jeff Grimsdale from Golden Hills School Division in Alberta. So Jeff, good to see you. I have some curiosities about Golden Hills, and I think there's a cultural piece here that is worth diving into. You and I had a conversation a while back around just this idea of recruitment and retention and staff well-being. And as much as there are, I would say, national, probably even provincial trends that would suggest this has become really challenging, you, on the other hand, have seen certainly some positive and some metrics that would suggest Golden Hills has been doing quite well as of late at times. So can you just tell me a little bit about Golden Hills, the culture, and kind of what you think it makes it kind of a special place for people to work and live?
Yeah, no, it sounds great. So Golden Hills is where our school division, we're not a huge school division. We're fairly spread out, where we've got communities in Three Hills, Trochu, Drumheller, Strathmore, Carsland, Acme, Linden. We're fairly spread out we're close to Calgary, but we're about half hour east of them. And we have about 8,000 students in bricks and mortar, and then we have another probably 4,000 online that we have. And so we are quite unique. We have 15 schools, 2 virtual schools, 3 outreach schools. We have 20 How to Write Colony schools, which adds its own dynamic. And then we have an international program where we take in anywhere from 200 to 300 students. And so we've got about 440 teachers, 1,000 staff, I would say. And again, just a lot of diversity within our school division. And I would say one of the things that makes I feel great is just we're the perfect size, I would say. And with that, I mean that our culture, and again, I'm going to frame this around our powerful learning framework. And I know that you've seen it, but others probably haven't. We have 3 kind of, And this gets to the support and the culture. We have three drivers in there. And so one of them is our strategic instruction, that basically just high yield, evidence based strategies that we use. And authentic engagement is the other driver, just about our culture and environment that able to foster learning. And it talks about creating that sense of belonging and well-being. And then we get into that growth mindset in that driver. And then we have the connecting and contributing. And that's about connecting to self, connecting to others, and then actually out into the community and doing something beyond the classroom. And so when we developed that, and we're going on 10 years here, but when we developed that, we were looking at Michael Fullen's work, Marzano. We looked at some of the strategies that Hattie was talking about. But at the center of what we're trying to do is get to that deep understanding for students to be able to take that and be able to transfer that into kind of new situations. And so I would say that's where our kind of foundation came from. And then our structure goes beyond that. And we talk about this culture of support all the time in Golden Hills and just how we are a supportive system. And when we look at our environment, we always talk about our teachers have this relentless commitment to improving student learning. And what do we do to support them, but also to push them? And so when we look at this, we always communicate, we're in this together, but it's not just words that we say, we actually mean it. That every year when I start off and give my speech out, I talk about many hands make light work, but we actually do that. And so some of the ways that we come about and do that is through our collaboration and our support. And I know I mentioned this when we talked earlier. When a new teacher comes to us, in many school divisions, they have mentorship programs, and we do too, but the mentorship programs are either to their local school or to a connecting teacher at another school that teaches the same grades. But we also offer a new teacher orientation. And so we have 3 or 4 days. And basically those days are for those teachers to get caught up in our powerful learning framework. What is this all about? And the key things in strategic instruction. So we're talking about critical thinking. We're talking about assessment. But it's for them to get their understanding of what's Golden Hills all about and what is the support that's here for me. Because things are more complex now than they ever have been. But as long as people feel that they're supported or can reach out to get support, that's key. And so one of the things is we have instructional coaches that work in that environment too. So they work with all our teachers and administrators. But what we do when a new teacher comes to us is we align them with an instructional coach for 2 years. And so at any point in time, they could reach out not to just their mentor teacher, but they can reach out to an instructional coach. And so that has really provided a support system for us. And then to go on to our collaborative days, and I know we have 4 days throughout the school year where we have our division come together. And so we pick places, either Drumheller or Three Hills or Strathmore, and we rotate them, where all of our teachers come together and they're in their collab group. So they're either in their grade level group, so all our grade 1 teachers are together, or they're in their subject specific. So we have high school math teachers that are together. And each of these groups basically work together for a goal of building capacity with themselves, but also how do we improve student learning? And so they have a goal sheet, a SMART goal sheet that they go through, and they work on that through the year. And basically there's a product that comes out of it, but it's a way of, John Hattie talks about that collective efficacy and teachers working together. And we know that in our division that it's clear we can achieve more together. And we've been doing that, like I said, for 10 years now. And we put out a satisfaction survey after each of these days. And at some point, the satisfaction survey might come back and it won't be as high, but we're still seeing a 95, 97% satisfaction rate on these days from our teachers. And for us, that means a lot. It means we're still moving in the right direction. We listen to all the feedback that's on there. And sometimes it's about, can we construct a new group? Can we do this? Our admin team wanted to have their own collaborative group. And so we listened to what they need. And we've created they only meet for half the day, but it's still a group where they could go to. And we had a theme of data collection last year, but each year there's a new thing or data analysis. But on top of that, I would say that our collaborative days do a couple of things. They provide for informal leaders. So we have facilitators in each of these groups who are lead teachers that take a informal leadership role, but they also work with our instructional coaches on the agenda and creating that for each of these days. from there, another part of our culture, I would say, is we have schools that are able to submit a powerful learning proposal. And so our division, will review these and we provide funds back to schools based on what these proposals are. And typically, I would say these proposals now are more morphing around the external experts that we're bringing in, and I'll get to that in a bit, and how they can work in their school for their specific situation. And I would say that, and the criteria basically is pretty simple, is like, how are we going to build capacity with our teachers in the school? And then how is that going to turn into improving student learning? And so if they can accomplish that in their proposal, and sometimes they have to work with their instructional coach and tweak it and we bounce it back, but we provide funding on how to, and it could be just a time frame of, can we have some extra PLC time to work with someone from the Critical Thinking Consortium, for example, or can we work with Katie White on assessment? And so we'll provide that funding. I could give you an example. Carsland School created a project called Ikanatsi, which is to shine bright in Blackfoot, but they created a land-based project working with elders where they go to their local park. And it's a great project. But these things come out of this innovation of being able to submit a proposal and the school's not worrying about their specific budget on that. When we look at that, we also have group proposals that can happen where 3 or 4 schools get together and say, hey, we would like to work on this. One comes to mind about, it was aquaponics. And so these 4 groups were talking about how they can get it going. And they all got it going to some degree, but we've had one school, our high school actually, had morphed this into a community greenhouse that's up and going now. And it's phenomenal. It's all self-run. They have solar panels on it. It's a community hub now. And all of this came from this idea of creating these proposals to their needs. And then our culture is on that support piece. And so our admin days, and everyone has administration days that they go through, but ours is about building capacity. And so we call it a learning day that they go through. And so we always talk about, and we match these up with whatever we're working on through our leadership series. And we have our administrators, they end up partnering up and getting into groups. But the goal of this is so that they can create something that we're working on in our leadership. Last year it was on well-being and achievement, but to create a presentation that other administrators can take back in their buildings and present to their staffs. And so we're all working on the same page and providing support to each other through our administrators. And then part and parcel of that turns into our leadership days, and which you and Katie White are going to be a part of this year. But typically each year we offer 2 or 3 days through our system leadership, and the schools bring a small team. So their admin team, but also they pick some informal leaders within their school to work with an external expert on whatever topic of that year. And I always remember the saying from Fullen, who says, go outside to grow inside type idea. And so these experts come and help spread our message of powerful learning, but it's also, they're reiterating what we're trying to accomplish ourselves. So it's a confirmation by bringing in those experts that we believe meet our values and believe in kind of the work that we're doing and understand our powerful learning. And so I can give you a couple examples of the people, like we work with Ainsley Rose, and that was in the very beginning. And Ainsley, we worked on just powerful learning and just creating what that vision and nurturing collaboration and what is a thinking culture. And that's where we started. And then from there, we went with Garfield Ginny Newman, and we worked on powerful learning and sustained inquiry and critical thinking. And then Peter Gamwell, we took a different shift, and he wrote the book, The Wonder Wall, but we worked on everyone has a seed of brilliance in them. And so through collaboration, we get this collision of ideas that foster this creativity and innovation. And then as we've done some work with Katie White and on just the assessment and just trying to get everybody on the same page as far as leading assessment change within their building and what are those assessment practices. And then last couple of years, we've been working with David Tranter, and that's been on the connecting students with well-being and achievement. And most of our schools focused on one of his sections in his book, The Third Path, on belonging. And how do we create that sense of belonging and get that back? Because we feel we lost a little bit of that during the COVID time. And then earlier I talked about just our powerful learning proposals, but after we have our leadership groups meet and go through our leadership days, they all want to put something in. So, for example, Katie White, it's okay. I know we're doing a broad thing about leading assessment change within Golden Hills here, but how does this affect me in my building? What are some specifics? I run an online school. I'm different than that other school. And so what ends up happening is their powerful learning proposal turns into how do we meet my specific needs in this area of assessment? And so when for the following year, they'll submit that, and then that becomes a part and parcel of Katie White coming directly to that school and meeting with that staff and working them through their unique situation. And so that just helps out with the finding the specific support for that school in that moment. And so that's really led well for us. The other part about our culture, I think I would talk about it, is celebration. We have a lot of great things going on. And the Leading and Learning Day, that you were a part of, Dean, there with the keynote, but many times we have our own individual teachers that wouldn't want to necessarily get up and speak in front of the group, but we found something that they've done that would be easily replicated in other schools and say, you took a chance, you stepped outside your comfort zone, look at the result that you've had, look at the impact, not just to your kids, but to the community or whatnot. And so we have them and we celebrate them that way. We showcase what they've done, but it also gives other teachers ideas of where they can move forward to in that. And then we also have our own Powerful Learning website where we celebrate things that are happening in schools. Here's a great idea. Maybe you want to try that. Here's something we're working with ESL students. We can do that. And then, so our culture comes from basically, I would say, the support piece. We have a large new admin group this year, and we'll sit through and we have a new admin orientation with them. And we offer basically we groom our own administrators, although we have some that have been brought into our school division. But what our culture is, we review that kind of with them, what our kind of leadership style is here, how they go about managing resources, but also dealing with critical conversations. And we know that those are very valuable these days. And so we go through scenarios and we bring in a mentor for them to work with. And so we just provide that support for the new administrators in our school division. And then we also, as I'm sure every other school division has, we have school division liaisons that work directly with schools and go out and meet with them and have questions about anything that arises, but also how do we move these schools forward. So we have a set of questions that we go through and we do an ed plan. I meet with every school and we go through that. It's a very open door policy in Golden Hills. Everybody has my cell phone, and some people may not like that, but at any point in time, they can reach out and just have a conversation. I would say the other support systems that our teachers feel fantastic about that is part of our culture is our resource teams at schools, where we have not just our teachers and administrators a part of, but we also have our social workers and psychologists. And so how do we work together to support the needs of our students? Teaching is becoming more complex, as we know, and we just want them to feel that they are not alone in this situation. And as I was mentioning before we started here today, that we have a Connections Clinic running today. And the Connections Clinic, we bring in, we have a pediatrician and a psychiatrist. And for a small division, we still feel that this is great value for us because it creates this wraparound service. And so the students come, the parents come, the EA comes, the social worker comes, the psychologist, the teacher, the administrator. And so everybody knows what the plan is moving forward. And when the family leaves, they feel like they're supported. The teacher feels like they're supported. The school feels like they're supported. And so I think and we offer a lot of intervention programs. We have to take money out of some other areas to keep all of this going, but we find that the more support and interventions that we can get out to our schools and to our students just helps us in the long run. And we're talking about, we provide funding for, I think some of this should be a health thing, but we provide OT, PT, speech, language, and then support in literacy and numeracy, early intervention for that. And I would say in Golden Hills, we talk about relationships, I feel, are the key for us. And I know lots of people talk about that, but it's that human and social capital. And I know early you mentioned something about retention, and our retention here is really high. Just talking with our deputy superintendent, who's fantastic. We have a 98% retention rate with our teachers in our school division. And many times when we see someone leave, it's more often because a spouse has got a job somewhere else and they end up going. We have, when we do our career fairs, we have people coming up to our booths and just saying, "Hey, I've heard about Golden Hills and I've heard about the supports." And it's word of mouth because we've been to so many career fairs doing our recruiting or whatnot. But I think that was a lot there, but I think that was sums up where we are, the culture of support. And because of that, people feel the relationships that they build in these collaborative days that we have, that they can reach out to just not someone in their own school, but someone else in the division that's doing something similar to what they're doing. And I think that adds a lot of assurance to them that they have the ability to reach out and connect with anyone in our division.
Well, thank you. I mean, that you painted a pretty detailed picture of Golden Hills, and there's a couple things that stand out for me. And I think there are things that some of these things are probably obviously you mentioned and you're highly aware of, but I also think maybe some of these things are because they're just there when you're internal, you sometimes don't maybe appreciate the significance of those structures and or those affordances. Like you mentioned, first of all, which I always think is interesting, right? Like 8,000 students. So this sort of, is there a sweet spot of a school division size that affords people the ability to have the resources to do the things we want to do, but at the same time, maintain relationships, the names of all your principals and vice principals. And I don't know if you know the names of all your teachers, but like you would be closer to that than say a school board of 25 or 30,000 where that's just not possible. So that's one thing that's interesting. And the other is interesting, and I don't know, I would be very curious to know, there is another school division in Canada that has the diversity of schools. Like you said, did you say you had 4,000 kids in online virtual
Yeah.
learning with your size? So is it 8 plus 4? Is it 12 then total?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's unusual. And then the Hutterite colonies is another, and I have some familiarity working with Hutterite colonies, so I know the dynamic that it brings. But then, of course, you bring all these people together, so you have some level of diversity in just their roles. Like it's very different if you're teaching a virtual class versus teaching in a Hutterite colony for sure. And yet seems to be some mechanisms by which maybe those people aren't like working side by side in these collaborative experiences, but there's access and there's sort of an awareness of that. And then the third component, I think, which, I mean, you said 10 years that you've started this powerful learning. That's a long time to take a framework and maintain its momentum. And because as you would be well aware of, and I certainly am, these kinds of frameworks can come and go depending on leadership. So the fact that you've been in leadership long enough to keep that going. And now it's not even about you at this point. It's about the division. This is just how we operate, how we are. And so I don't know if, again, part of what I'm trying to do is take what's happening here and seeing if other people see things that either they're curious about and or can, I don't want to say replicate, that's not the word I'm looking for, but can learn from, for sure. I would just wonder, rather than digging into all, let me just ask you specifically about powerful learning and how is it that you were able to maintain the momentum and the focus on this for 10 years? So what are the drivers of this that have not, because again, we might say powerful learning, like people put in practices and I don't know, maybe we revisit those. Maybe those aren't the things we believe anymore, whatever it is that have frameworks, if you will, fizzle out. So what is it you think in terms of this that has had the staying power?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. When we first started this, I was a director at that time, or maybe I was even a principal when we started it, but I was in a part of it from the ground up. And when we started, it was probably too much academia. We had all of these grandiose ideas, but it wasn't palatable for people. And so when we first put it out, we had this big, thick document, and it was like, we were all too invested. We were so invested, the people that were developing it and writing it and reaching it. Like it was this could have been a thesis project for us, but this is the right direction to be going in. And we were but people couldn't digest it. And so I would say what we learned within the first couple of years is we needed to make this manageable so that people could take pieces of this. And it's like, how do we create a Cole's Notes or clean up some of these areas? And so it took us a couple of years to get to that where let's have just a 2-pager that kind of explains these areas. But let's have the website where if people wanted to go down that rabbit hole of where did they get this information
Sure.
from or what, they could go and do that. And that's, I think, evergreen always happens. And so nothing is static in it. It is, oh, we've learned this or this has come out. Let's see what the value in that is. Let's take a risk. Let's try this out. This is something that we can add to our powerful learning. So it's always evolving. And I think that's how we've been able to maintain it. We have the initial thought process behind it was great, but then again, it was too complex for people to be able to pick this up. What is this? There's no way I'm going to go through 15 pages of this to try and figure this out to get to. I'm just looking for some activities on critical thinking. And
Sure.
now you can do that through our website. Click on critical thinking, look up a few things that may fit with them. And then the other part is showcasing our stories of how something has worked in a classroom. And I think that is really what's triggered our teachers to take a look at, to say, oh, they've done this and that worked. So let me try that. And sometimes it's just about taking that step, that uncomfortableness for a minute to try something that someone else has done. And so as we go through this, we're always rejuvenating it. We have literacy and numeracy frameworks that we know that we've kept static for a period of time, but then those have to be updated. We've got new learning that has occurred. So now we need to put it in there. I always remember when Michael Fulling comes, he says his ideas just keep refining as he goes through. So he keeps writing a new book, but it's based off of some ideas from before, but it is just more ideas that have come to him or a different collision of ideas that he's connected to put into his next one. And I think that's a little bit of a comparison of what we're kind of doing here too.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. I mean, a couple things like, yes, the foundation on which these ideas are built have an academic core and a robustness to it. But that's not what you pass along to practitioners because they're not, but it's there, right? Yeah. If you want to know why we're doing what we're doing, this is why. There's a whole bunch of research and backing that says this is really critical. And again, much of that is intuitive, right? Yeah, of course, we know that, but somebody's actually done the work to say it's not just gut feeling. It is actually based on research. But yeah, then it becomes the last thing I'll say, and I will shift gears a little bit here. And I just picked this up as you're speaking, and again, my little time with your folks. And this is, yeah, I don't want to say this in any kind of a disparaging way to any other boards, because it's not. But a lot of boards I work with, when I would ask similar questions that I did to you, when they talk about what their school board is about, they will talk about students. And yes, obviously, 100%, that is our goal. That's what we're here for. But what has happened, I think, and this is me with my little old opinion, is what has happened. And I will give you the example of the province of Ontario as a very specific example. Province of Ontario, probably, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, were the first province to actually put student well-being in one of their provincial goals, which I thought was awesome. That's great that we're not just talking about what's going on in your head, but we're also talking about the heart, all of those other things. But the problem with that was that there was a lack of focus on what does that mean for teachers? Like, it's great that we want students to be well, but if we're not taking care of the adults, that's not going to happen. And so I don't want to say they've not retracted, but they've refocused that a little bit because they realize that. But I think that if we start by saying you as a leadership team have the most access to adults, that is who you serve. And so from a leadership perspective, I believe that your primary focus is, I got to make sure these adults are equipped, ready, and prepared. And they are the ones that have the direct contact with the students. Yeah, that becomes their. So I think there's that. I don't know if that's a bit of a subtlety, but I think it's a really important emphasis that from a leadership perspective, our focus is to make sure our teachers are prepared, are ready, and are supported to do the work and then at that point, we trust them. Like, we know they will do the good work. That's why we hired them. They have those skills. But if they're not feeling supported, like, all the student goals you have in the world, not going to not going to work. So I don't know if at any point in this journey that has been an intentional kind of aspect to it. Again, you've alluded it in a number of ways, and basically that's been the theme of what you've shared. But I think that's a distinction that not all school districts make.
Yeah, and when we started our work with after COVID with Dr. Tranter and getting into the third path and that well-being and achievement, one of the first things that we said is, just as you mentioned, taking care of teacher well-being. If they don't have that, how are they going to get to doing this part of it? And we don't want to do anything that is just, I'll use the word fluffy or whatnot, but just a one-off that's going to do something. We do have wellness champions at our schools that we give out a little bit of money to schools so that they can do something where they have something wellness within the school that they could create. Each school can do their own thing. And then we have a committee here as well. But I think a lot of angst and stuff comes from is lack of support. And I'm not saying that every teacher feels like they're fully supported all the time, because there are complex situations where we need to work through how much support is needed for these challenging students that could come their way. And so part of it is the idea is to build capacity within the adults but also know that they could reach out to get information, get support. We're a small division, but we use anywhere from about $1 million that we put extra into inclusive education to help support EAs within the classroom. That doesn't come in that budget. And so we're having to take from other areas, but we feel that this is an area that really we need to support our teachers with. And while that ask could go up every year because there just wouldn't be enough money, but we try and feel that we can provide support where we can.
And over time, I think people understand, to whatever degree they can, that there is a limited amount of resources, and your job is to determine the best use of those resources and maximize those, which means that in some cases, some things don't get the funding that you would perhaps like to give it or feel it should, but like that this is the pie, right? This is the pie we have, and your job is to figure out where to direct these funds and maximize that. But again, I think what you've demonstrated over time is the fact that the priorities are pretty clear and everybody knows that. And it sounds like for the most part, that's been successful. So what a fantastic share of the things in Golden Hills. I want to shift gears a little bit, focus a little bit more on you specifically. And I always ask when I think about the role of leadership, because again, you've already demonstrated your leadership through this, and I noticed everything. You hardly referenced yourself. You weren't being highlighted. You were highlighting everybody else, which is also, I think, a very significant leadership trait that people appreciate. But tell me a little bit about perhaps a leadership challenge that you face. And there's always challenges. There's challenges that are happening at the moment. There's challenges that happened last year. There's challenges that have happened throughout your career. So I would just love to hear one that sort of sticks in your mind as that was really tough. And I wasn't quite sure how I was going to deal with that, but I did. And again, I even like stories where, maybe the ending isn't always happy. It's like, I think I didn't quite get that right. And I know that, but it's been part of my journey. So if there's just one that pops into your head around, yeah, that was tough, that you can share with us and just kind of walk through that challenge, would be great.
Yeah. When I was thinking about this, as you just said that, I think, and some of this isn't over yet. I would say one of the things that as a leadership challenge is sometimes you want to I don't want to say take the hit for others, but this is part of our organization. And so you want to be on the forefront to be able to respond to these things that come up. And I would say navigating this is a polarizing world sometimes. And so we have some challenging parents that may come after an administrator or come after a teacher. And I think you're in the area of support for how do we help support them? And we do everything that we can. I feel that with my support team here, we can deal with any situation that comes our way. But I do think it takes its toll on people, especially when, their character potentially may be attacked or whatnot. I just think that, again, it's about building capacity with others on how to say, we'll get through this. We're in it together. And I think that's, when I think of challenging things, that's what comes to the forefront. There's also that managing resources strategically, and we mentioned that or whatnot, but that would be another area where you're having to make decisions on, so you're pulling stuff from a certain area and putting it in other areas. And then you're having to not just, I don't want to say sell it, but you're having to explain that to others. Your board is reviewing what your budgetary system is. So that there is explaining to them why the benefits of having to put this money in here that wasn't allocated from the province into that area. And so there are questions all the time about that. But I think when you have a good values and your vision that you're going to go for, that you could stand on that and say, here's the rationale of why we've made this decision to do this. If it comes from a genuine spot, I think that people that resonates, even if they don't like it, they can potentially understand the
Right.
rationale why.
Yeah, and
So
that's why you build the frameworks. That's why you build these things to have some shared language and some shared beliefs and values, and then those decisions should align with those values and say, we've already said this is, we believe in belonging and whatever that frame is, and so this reallocation is to support that area that maybe isn't getting the support that it needs at the moment. But yeah, no, I mean, and I appreciate that. And again, having foundational things in place and a support in place gives you the capacity to do that. So my next question revolves around that building capacity, because you want to have a legacy of people coming behind you who can continue on this work. As you said, you weren't in this role when this sort of powerful learning began, but you've been part of that moving forward. So now as you look to your community and you think about young leaders and people who you either you identify or they identify as, hey, educational leadership is something that I think I might like to pursue, and I'd like to maybe continue on in that role. What advice do you give to those young people who maybe are considering maybe becoming a principal one day, or working at the district office, or taking your job, whatever it is? What advice do you give them?
yeah, I think it's admirable for people to want to take leadership roles. The one thing I say, and I probably got this from hockey, is learn to excel where you're at. And once that happens, good things happen. People see that you're going a little bit beyond or you're doing something very well. And so it's excelling where you're at, and then opportunities will happen. We in Golden Hills, we do have opportunities for informal leadership that they could be facilitators of those groups. They can become instructional coaches. They can become on their school leadership team to go to our leadership system days. So there are opportunities in many ways for our younger teachers to become leaders. And we see it. They start to percolate. They'll come and ask questions about what they should be doing. Some go into going to get their masters. I would say the first thing is to excel where you're at and try and build capacity in your building that you're at, and good things will come of that.
Well, and that speaks to authenticity, and it's very difficult to I mean, really, the longer you are trying to be somebody that you're not, or focus on the things that you're not, the harder this work is. The more you can lean into this is, I mean, that my strengths, who I am, and as an individual, the easier it is to do this work. Last question before I get into some quick ones to take us out here. And again, when I ask this question, people don't like the question because it's hard. But I'm asking you to name one person, not 10 that you could name, but one person that you're grateful for. Thinking about maybe somebody that might actually listen to this or hear this. Doesn't have to be that, but I'm just putting some criteria they might want to consider, or somebody that maybe doesn't get maybe the accolades that others get, but it could be one person. I know there are many, but I'm asking just pick one today.
I would say Wes Miskimen, the deputy superintendent. I couldn't do the job I do without his support. He's extremely knowledgeable. He has the same value system as me, down to earth, very practical, but also is the person that I remember saying and says, if both of you think always alike, then one of you is irrelevant. And I think it is. He gives me that straight shooter. This is what I think about this. And I really appreciate that openness that he shares with me so that we're able to make the best decision for our division. Again, he's invaluable to our system for sure.
Yeah. Again, it's awesome to have people in your life that that don't see the world exactly the same way you do. And those are really, and be able to have a relationship and lean on people like that. That's fantastic. All right. 3 quick questions just to get you out of here. What is on your kind of reading list today? Or listening. I'm thinking more about professionally. What are you consuming these days in that space?
Yeah. So right now I'm reading The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. When the cell phone policy in Alberta came in, it was one of the things that was on my list. I just hadn't got to it. It talks about the mental health and kind of the decline of play-based and getting into the phone-based childhood. That's very interesting. I think it's Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni. I'm partway through that book as well. I think I've always liked his books, just they tell the fable but I can always relate those books back to the education world, so to speak. Yeah.
And what about just for fun when you're just trying to get away and it's like, all right, it's Friday night. I've had a full week. I want to shut my brain off a little bit. What's more on the sort of the binge or the escapism side of things?
Yeah. I would say if we're talking about just what I'm watching or
Yeah.
on TV or whatnot would be right now I'm watching that Task with Mark Ruffalo. I think it's on yeah, it's about a task force, FBI, and
Okay. I'm not
yeah,
trying to
trying
know
to
that
be
one. I'll have
yeah,
to look at that one.
it's good. And I'm watching the Amanda Knox story too. I read The Monster of Florence, and at the very end of The Monster of Florence, it talked about this investigator who was also the prosecutor, and it's actually this exact same person who the Monster of Florence trials or whatnot is the same prosecutor that's did the Amanda Knox, and so there are some similarities there. So yeah, those are the two that I'm watching right
Okay.
now. What I have time.
All right. And again, this is your opportunity to give a shout out to the entire, you got to pick a spot. I mean, Drumheller, if I type in Drumheller, I know what I'm going to get as far as like things to do there. That's pretty well known. So I'm looking for something maybe in a bit of a lesser known in your community or where you're living. By the way, where do you live? I don't even know where you live. Where's home? Strathmore?
Just outside of Strathmore, I live in Lie Alta, so it's
Okay.
just a
Anyway.
smaller community.
So anywhere that you think that's a lesser known thing that people should spend a little time checking out. So what's a little bit of a lesser known hidden gem, if you will, in the area?
Yeah, I would say Wyndham Park down by Carsland. It's right on the Bow River. It's beautiful. It's where we have our land-based thing that happens with Carsland School, but it's breathtaking down there, and it's yes, if you haven't seen it, you should go down there.
Okay. Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time. I knew when you and I started having some conversations that there's something special about Golden Hills, and this was just a good opportunity for me to learn a little bit more about why is that, and it makes me more curious to even dig more into some of the things that you shared today, because I think there's a lot of things that people could learn from. So appreciate your time and sharing the good things happening in your school division in Alberta.
All right. Thanks so much, Dean. I appreciate it, and always happy to share what good things are happening in Golden Hills.